In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
This week on Money Tales, we're joined by Filipa Lancastre, someone who has never been afraid to do things differently. While most young adults in Portugal stay under their parents' roof until their 30s, Filipa took a different route. As a rising McKinsey consultant, she bought her own place, got her parents to guarantee the loan, and walked away 5 years later with a 50% return. But that's just the beginning. Today, Filipa is a strategy professor, a mother of 6, and a global citizen who's lived and worked across multiple countries. She holds a PhD in management from NOVA SBE and an MBA from INSEAD. With a background in industrial engineering, Filipa blends analytical thinking with strategic insight into everything she does. She's also passionate about having open, honest conversations about money with her family, something she believes is essential to building financial confidence and resilience.
Here are 3 key money topics Filipa hits on in this episode. First, how her mother used lore and conversation to help Filipa learn balance when it came to spending. Those lessons shaped Filipa's approach to reasonable spending without overthinking every purchase. Second, why she and her husband focus on keeping up with friends, not the Joneses. They find that aligning their lifestyle with their friends' spending levels allows them to feel comfortable in community with others. And third, how money is a means, not an ends. Both in her academic work on social entrepreneurship and in her personal life, Filipa emphasizes that money should serve purpose rather than becoming the purpose itself. Now it's our pleasure to bring you Filipa Lancastre's Money Tales.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
Sandy, it was interesting to connect with one of our past guests recently and have her share how reluctant she was sharing the Money Tales episode with her family.
Well, her parents specifically. I think the rest of the family has heard the episode, but not her parents.
You're right. And I thought that was interesting. And she was sharing with friends and colleagues, but not her parents.
She shared a funny dinner time conversation where the whole family got together and someone brought it up. And I think she was kicking that person under the table, trying to hush them. But it is interesting. And it's a good reminder that our money tales are ours, and we might have perspectives about money, or we might view things in our life pertaining to money and anything else differently than other people who were involved, especially our family members. So it can be quite vulnerable to share these money stories and even engage in money conversations with family members and other people who are close to us.
So Sandy, what would be your one tip if you wanted to nudge? Because I think she had a great story to share and I'd love for her parents to listen. What would be your one little nudge to help bring it up maybe?
I think just to start a money conversation, dip a toe in the water. Hey, Mom, I've been thinking about money a lot lately. How do you think about it?
What a great way to bring that up.
Open the conversation and sort of prime both of her parents in this situation to get ready, and then maybe over a period of time, let them know about the episode and share it with them.
What a soft way to introduce it and make a comfortable conversation.
And if the guest has gratitude toward her parents, that could be a really nice way to lead into the conversation and talk about whatever feelings she has of appreciation toward how her parents raised her or how she has evolved since she grew up. Whatever the case may be, I always look for ways to bring in that appreciation because I don't think we thank others enough.
Oh, that's such a good point. Well, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, our guest today. It's my pleasure to turn our conversation. Welcome, Filipa Lancastre, to the Money Tales podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Cami, and thank you, Sandy, for having me.
Filipa, would you introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments that influenced who you are today?
Currently, I'm a professor of strategy and business ethics at Católica Lisbon Business School here in Portugal. I started out in industrial engineering. This is what I studied. But my life suffered a lot of pivotal moments, I would say. And so I recently discovered that I really enjoy academia and teaching, especially. I'm also a mother of 4 plus 2 stepsons, so a large family. Well, a couple of pivotal moments in my life, I would say, when I finished graduating from a very technical university, I joined McKinsey as a strategy consultant. This has changed my mindset quite a lot. And also, this is where I met my husband. So it was a very pivotal moment for me. Another pivotal moment is when I became a mother in January 2006. I think these were very relevant moments.
Where'd you grow up, Filipa?
I grew up in Cascais in Portugal. So it's a small city close to Lisbon, 30 kilometers away from Lisbon. I lived most of my childhood and adolescence life here in Cascais. Then I studied in Lisbon, and then I moved abroad as I joined McKinsey. Eventually, I came back to Cascais, where I love to be.
Oh, that's wonderful. And tell us, when you were growing up, when did money start having meaning to you?
Well, I can't really finger point a date, but I remember as a child having talks with my parents about this. I was probably about 6 or 7 when they started providing a small weekly allowance. I remember having a piggy bank and often counting the coins. My parents called myself Uncle Scrooge, not because I was greedy, but because I really liked accumulating. I remember my mom saying that for most of us, money is male, but for me, she said, it seems like your money is female because it seems to reproduce.
That's funny. I've never heard that expression before.
I remember talking about money with my parents, yes.
How did that early childhood experience of talking about money play into the decisions you were making when you decided to go off to technical university? Were you thinking about money as a person transitioning to college and a career beyond that?
I don't know if money had really an important role there. As a child, there were several things that I remember talking to my parents about that were really eye-opening. When I accumulated enough money, I decided I wanted to buy a shower gel, something that I really enjoyed as a young girl. So I used very small portions of the gel because I didn't want to spend too much. And I remember my mom saying that this spending should be reasonable, neither falling short nor overspending. And she told me a story about a Scotsman that enjoyed drinking his tea with 2 spoons of sugar, but at home he only took 1 to save. And in other people's houses, he would have 3 to make the most out of it. And she said he never really took the tea as he liked with 2 spoons. This is something that I really remember that my mom taught me.
I'm curious, what does that story bring to life for you?
It tells me that I should be reasonable, not to overthink about money, but at the same time, live frugally. Even today, I retain that I don't really need to spend a lot to be happy. But I don't need to overthink every expenditure because that also causes anxiety. So both sides of the coin are not the ideal, but to be moderate in this case would be a very reasonable way of living.
Finding that right balance. Filipa, I'm wondering, you move forward in life, you work for McKinsey, a global company comprised of some of the smartest people in the world. And you spend a lot of time working there, traveling abroad. How did that impact how you were relating to money in your personal life?
McKinsey paid quite well compared to other jobs here in Portugal. I decided that I wanted to move out of my parents, which was something that was not very usual at my age here in Portugal. People stay at home until they're 30, which is probably something that shocks you.
For financial reasons or just cultural reasons primarily?
Mostly cultural, but also nowadays for financial reasons as well. It's difficult to find a house. But at that point, I remember that I did my accounting and I said, okay, I would like to have a small house, as small as it can be, but I would like to have my own house. And it was a quite big commitment at the beginning. And my parents helped me not by lending me any money, but by being the people who guarantee the loan from the bank. I remember the commitment was quite huge, but it was something that I thought I could assume at that point. And I don't think I was aware at that point of the real estate risks, but eventually the investment was quite positive because real estate was really on fire. And I learned that leverage could have serious benefits, but it was risky too. We work a lot with banking here in Portugal, with the banking sector. And I had the opportunity to work in private banking as well. And one of the things that I remember learning from the projects that I did there is that a very significant part of your decision is much more on asset allocation than stock picking directly. So I became very rational in terms of investment. And I think my husband has the same rational kind of decision. So we align very well and we are very rational in our decision making in terms of investments.
I want to dive into that. But before we do, Filipa, what did it feel like having to have your parents guarantee your investment in this property? And how did you navigate those conversations with them?
I think it was quite a big responsibility, but I was comfortable with the amount of money I was making. I didn't feel that I was too leveraged in that respect. So this might represent something like a quarter of my salary, the installments. It was risky, but I thought that it was a controlled risk. I didn't feel too bad about that. After, I think it was about 2 or 3 years when I started moving abroad, I rented the house, and with the rent, I paid the installments. And in 5 years, I sold the house for about 50% more of what I had bought. So it was easy to pay the loan and get a huge benefit from this investment because I was so leveraged. My parents were always very open to talk about money. So this was not an issue. When I thought about leaving the house, I remember there's still a friend that always reminds me about this. When I asked my father, when I said, well, Dad, I'm thinking about moving and buying my own house. How much would you give me? And he would say, well, just a pat in the back.
Gave you the encouragement, not the money.
By the way, he was half Brit. He was much more independent and less this cultural, familiar and cozy person that likes to keep all the children at home until very late, which is typically how the Portuguese see it. He was very much raised and educated by a British mother, also in a boarding school. So he was quite independent in that sense and said, if you want to move out, that's fine. I'm the first one to promote that, but I won't lend you any money.
I love his clarity to you in setting expectations. Filipa, did you say that you not only worked abroad, but you moved abroad, living in different countries? How many different countries did you live in, and were you married at the time? Or is that before you got married?
This was before I got married. I was working in projects, but I lived where I was carrying out these projects. So I lived in a few countries, but not for a long time. I lived in Czech Republic, in Brazil, Argentina. Then when I studied at INSEAD, I lived in France and Singapore. This before I got married. I eventually came back to Portugal again because McKinsey was subsidizing my studies at INSEAD. And I stayed for another year and a half until I paid my dues with McKinsey. And then my husband and I decided to get married. I was already here in Portugal. Eventually, at some point, he got an opportunity in Madrid and we decided to move there.
So you've been a bit of a globetrotter, and I'm wondering if spending time living in different countries has had an impact on your relationship with money, and if so, how you would describe that.
Definitely when I was abroad studying in INSEAD, I had to manage my money because McKinsey provides an allowance and pays for the tuition, but you have to manage it. While I was at McKinsey, it's difficult to have time to spend all the money that you get. But not that I received a lot of money, but you don't have much time.
You're just working all the time.
Yeah, we worked a lot of time and most of the things McKinsey paid for. So traveling and housing and meals abroad, etc. But when I was studying abroad, I stopped working for a year. So I had to manage that allowance when I was abroad. I was always very frugal with spending. That comes from my education, my background. It might have been difficult when you are given such a large amount of money at the beginning. If you are not used to being frugal, then you end up overspending in the first few months, probably. But I was quite frugal. Again, from education, my parents were always quite frugal. So it wasn't that complicated, but definitely I felt that was the first time that being away from work during a year, not being paid on a monthly basis, is different.
Filipa, you talked about how you and your husband are aligned on investments, and you've got a large household of children, 6 of them, that you've got to help support and raise. Describe how you and your husband talk about money and talk about saving and spending on the kids and life in general.
We do talk a lot about money. We talk about it very often and very openly. We only have one bank account and we share everything. All kinds of investments, all kinds of savings and expenditures we discuss, especially the big ones, of course. But I say that we are aligned in the sense that we think that if you learn to spend less than what you earn, you don't have to really worry about it. Being frugal and teaching our children how important frugality is one of our pillars. The amount you spend should not be correlated to what you earn. It should be limited to what you need. This is, for me, what frugality is. I remember my husband saying we only need to have as much money as our friends do. If our friends don't have a lot, we don't need to have much more either, because, we don't want to stand out. This was one of the things that we actually talk about. The other thing is that for us, money is just a means and not the ends. We are very curious people. We enjoy learning, traveling, being with friends, helping others, normal stuff, I would say. As long as we have accumulated what we consider enough, we don't really need to continue accumulating ever more. My husband has just retired a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, because we said, okay, enough is enough. He was working at McKinsey for 30 years. I think that it's more important at some point in time, you figure out that the most important asset you have is time, not money.
The time-money continuum is really interesting because oftentimes they're correlated. I was just going to ask about what you said earlier about your husband emphasizing that you should only have as much money as you need to be able to spend what your friends are spending.
If you have friends who have boats and have planes and spend a lot of money on holidays, you feel that you need to keep up with that. If your friends are just living a normal life, you don't want to be apart from them either. We also like to have our own holidays where we spend as much as we figure out is reasonable. But in our usual and day-to-day life, we'd like to be aligned with what our friends also feel comfortable with and not overspending.
So that you're able to maximize your time with them and enjoy it and not feel that anyone's better off or worse off.
I feel that it's much more important to be comfortable with your friends and your family than having everything money can buy.
It's interesting. Here in the United States, there's this theory that everyone wants to make sure that they're making more than their neighbor. What you're describing is almost the opposite of that concept. So it stuck with me. I appreciate you going deeper into that.
I think it's cultural also here in Portugal. I don't say that everybody has to think the same way I do, but I think in terms of culture here in Portugal, it's less about standing out and more about feeling good in a community.
Filipa, you've become a professor, very different than being a globe-trotting managing consultant, but also extremely prestigious. When you think about alignment of values of the two different occupations, which one is more aligned with your values?
I think they both played and play a very important role in who I am. I'm the kind of person who's very grateful for the opportunity at McKinsey. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people there that are incredible people, including my husband. I'm incredibly grateful for the time I spent there. That is built a part of who I am. During a part of my life when I decided to leave McKinsey and afterwards I got a job at a telecom company, when we moved to Madrid, I decided to stay at home with my children. That was a time when everything changed for me, when I became a mom. My priorities changed. For me, it was no longer the successful career person. I didn't want to go back to that corporate life when eventually my children started to go to school. And that's when I thought about academia. I'm a very curious person, as I said before, and I love studying whatever topic. But there was a topic that fascinated me at that time, which was social entrepreneurship. And this is what I have studied for my PhD. And then eventually I found my vocation and purpose in life other than being a mom. I love teaching more than research. I do feel that I have found my vocation later in life.
When did you become a full-time academic?
When I started my PhD, I was already fully dedicated to it, but I became a professor 3 years ago. This will be my fourth. So when I finished my PhD, I did some work as a researcher first, and then I had this opportunity to join the Catholic University here in Portugal for the business school, and that's where I teach now.
I was just wondering how being a professor, especially a professor of business and ethics, has impacted how you think about money. We could have a whole episode on money and ethics.
Definitely. This actually came a little bit earlier when I was staying at home with my children. One of my hobbies was to read philosophy. I love ethics in particular. And I remember reading several books, but one of them that really impressed me was Aristotle's book for when he wanted to teach his son, about ethics. This whole thing about being moderate and the virtue being in the middle is something that is very aligned with how I think about money. Money being a means and not the ends. I think that's very important. That's also very aligned with how I look at money and how I deal with it. It's not really my aim to accumulate more than I need. It's just a means to do something more. And it's important that it's clear in your mind what your purpose is. If you have a purpose and you actually don't need a lot of money to fill in or to accomplish that purpose, then there's so much work you need to do. It's great. And if your work is aligned with your purpose, even better, because you are being paid for something you would love to do, which is my case.
And you studied social entrepreneurship, which feels like it's right in line with what you're talking about. I'm curious, when you look out at the world today and see so much new change opportunities for entrepreneurship, are you seeing as much in the area of social entrepreneurship as you'd like to see?
I really am impressed and humbled by the very surprising and admiration is what I feel for those that are starting these new initiatives. Their minds are always on helping someone or helping the environment, but they're not directly on profits. They see, again, money as a means and not the ends. And this is why social entrepreneurship is so aligned with how I feel entrepreneurship should be thought about. For us, social entrepreneurship is a lot more about innovation, finding innovative solutions for an intractable social problem. And for Americans, the American perspective is more like, how can I make money and at the same time help someone? Which are both correct and legit. The interesting part for me is, how can I help people who want to help others with the knowledge that I have experienced and learned along my personal life? This doesn't sound very obvious when you look at it, but when you say I'm a professor of strategy and business ethics, they are very linked, because my purpose as a researcher is to find ways and business models that are helpful for social entrepreneurs to ensure that they reach their ends, ensure that they can fulfill and contribute to solve some social intractable problem, but at the same time being financially sustainable. That's how strategy and social entrepreneurship and ethics mix up together in my academic life and research.
As a moderate spender, someone who thinks about money as being something that's necessary but not the end goal, have you tripped on any ethical decisions around money in your life, Filipa?
I think that you have ethical decisions every day. How much am I going to give the beggar in the street? How much is enough? How much should I spend on my children? I look to education issues. I always tell them, if you are going to do something about increasing your abilities or growing as a person, that's something it's worthwhile investing a lot. And I'm totally for it. On the other side, if they're thinking, oh, I need another sweater or I need another ball, like my son always tells me, he has hundreds of balls, but he always needs another one. And I said, no. You always have to think about what is reasonable or not. And you have these ethical decisions all the time. I don't think I make things too complicated, but I always teach my children not only what they can do or not with the money, but why. The why for me is very important, the motivation for it. One of the things that I remember, I think it's from Seneca. He says, it's not the one that has few things that is poor, is the one that wishes for a lot. If you manage to control how much you want, your wants, let's put it this way, you actually won't be too dependent on how much money you have. What you really need to is to control your ambition. Focus on relevant things, but skip the superfluous ones.
I'm inspired by that.
Filipa, what's your next money conversation going to be, and who's it going to be with?
Probably with my children at dinner table. Here in Portugal, we have a saying that talking about money during meals time is very impolite. Here at our house, we talk about a lot of things during our meals, which we like to spend with the family all together. Many times we take these opportunities to teach our children about stock markets, how they work, what is investing, what is not investing. And some of them are interested, some of them are not. That's fine. One day or the other, they will all need it.
That's fantastic. I love it. And I love that you're bucking the trend and talking about money during meal times. Filipa, where's the best place for our listeners to find you?
At the university. I do post a little on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is always a great spot. It has been such a pleasure talking with you, getting into philosophy, thinking about life and how ethical questions we're faced every day. I really appreciate you bringing that to life. And thank you for joining us on Money Tales.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a very enjoyable conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Aspirient. Go to aspirient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@aspirient.com. See you next time.